Today we're looking at the idea of spiritual guidance. And I would like to present you with an idea about guidance that I think you'll find helpful. Because so often we look at guidance as a process where we're involved in something we don't know what to do. We don't know what direction to go. We don't know what choice to make. And we would like answers. So we're kind of out on a limb looking for some level of security. And this week or not this week, but over the last couple of weeks, I got my telescope out. I've got an 8-inch telescope that I bought while we lived in Evergreen. And there, the sky, of course, was just absolutely beautiful. In terms of no city lights, where we lived, there were no lights. You could see Denver kind of glowing over the horizon, but that wasn't too bad. So it made perfect sense to have a telescope, and I got one. And since we've been in Grand Junction for just over 16 years, it's been in storage in a box, because I thought, well, the lights here are really bad, and I'm saying the lights where I live, and they are. No, the lights are really good, but the sky is really bad. You can't see a lot of what's out there. So I thought there's no sense in bringing it out. Well, I got it out anyway and started playing around with it, and it's still better to see something than nothing. You know, I was watching Saturn last night, and there's just something about looking at that planet and the ring, the rings that go around it, that you just don't see that kind of thing every day. And it's a good reminder that we live in a place that it's bigger than we think most of the time, and that's kind of what looking at these things does. And I'm working with photography, trying to get some photos of this stuff. But anyway, I'll make do, and we can go out in the desert and take it out there and get some good pictures. I'm getting familiarized with everything. My telescope it's called a Go-2, and I got an equatorial mount for it, which will mean nothing to most of you probably, but it's a new mount. It's run by software, and the old software when I brought it out of the box, the old software was gone. It was expired, 17 years, 18 years old, probably 19 years old. There isn't much software that lasts 19 years. So I got a new mount for it with new software and the ability to update it. So I'm having to learn it. And the backyard is a perfect place to practice that kind of thing, that learning curve. But one of the things you do with this telescope, and this is not a picture I took, but I want to use it as an illustration. You know what this is? Somebody has opened the aperture of their camera, or the lens of their camera, and left it open until the stars, make a perfect circle around it. At the center is a Polaris, or the North Star, and the white dot you see there is mine. I did take that. I stuck that in there because it was not real clear, just for illustration purposes. But you focus a camera on the North Star, and you just leave the shutter open. It's a long exposure, and it looks like the stars are doing this, but it's not the stars, it's us. We're turning, the Earth is turning, and also when you have software that needs to be updated, that doesn't mean the stars have changed. That means technology has changed. They're all doing the same thing. But in this, with this equatorial mount, with this telescope, you do what they call a polar alignment. And what that is you set the telescope up, you face the thing to the north, and then you put it at the right angle. It's about 39 degrees, almost 40 degrees, where it's on the North Star. And there's a little scope in the mount that when you get that North Star centered, then when you push, you do a couple of other star alignments when you get that centered, and you line the telescope up anywhere from 2 to 5 stars, whatever you want to do. But then that tells the computer, it's like a mathematical equation. It tells it exactly where to go. So on the keypad, if it says Mars, for example, you just hit Mars and the thing goes over and it looks at Mars. And it's an incredible technology, but what's even more incredible is that the technology can be built around this universe that does that is so precise that it's able to do that. And that's why I said the software itself is what went out of date, not the universe. The universe is still going. But anybody can take a picture like this if you have, a setup that it's not that sophisticated. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But it's a pretty amazing thing. So you get centered on the North Star, and then from there you can move around. You can go different places, and so we often think of spiritual guidance as a means of navigating from a place where we're either lost or longing for something we do not have. Okay, guidance with a telescope, there's only one point really that you need to find, and that is the North Star. And everything beyond that, the telescope will take care of it. It falls in place. It's mathematics. If you're not aligned on the North Star, you cannot stay on any object for very long. It's pretty interesting when you're looking through a telescope. You focus on something. Say you're not using your computer. You just find an object and you look at it. It just travels right across the screen, right across the eyepiece, because the Earth is moving, and that's the moving Earth that we're seeing. So nothing stays still. So what the computer does, it locks on a planet or a star, nebula, or whatever we're looking at, and it runs at the same time that the Earth runs, so it looks like the object is sitting there still, and you can take pictures of it. So if you take pictures, with and it's moving, you'll get a streak rather than a blur, rather than a pinpoint, which is what everybody's trying to get. And my setup is it's not a Hubble level. We're all pretty spoiled with some of the pictures we see from Hubble. But even if it's not, it's still pretty fascinating. And it's like it gives you it extends your vision to be able to have a deeper experience with this place that we live. But we think of spiritual guidance as we've got to get someplace. I'm in a place where I can't figure out where I'm at, and so I pray for guidance. With the telescope, there's only one thing. There's only one place to go, and that's to the North Star. You get aligned with that, and then everything else falls in place. And they call it slewing, the telescope slews around, it moves. I don't know where they come up with some of these terms, but when you go to a star or an object, I don't really look at stars because they're not that interesting to look at because they're so far away. They're just beams of light, and then when you look at them in a telescope, they're a little bit larger. It's not that interesting. But when you're aligned with the North Star, then you go to an object and it'll stay in view. But if you don't align with the North Star, that object will drift out of view. And I was just thinking about this thought that when I get someplace, when I'm guided, and I'm kind of bouncing between two things here. When I'm personally asking for guidance, I've got this problem and I want to resolve it. So often we do resolve the problem, but because we're not centered on our North Star or our center of power, our Christ, our soul, we may get that thing in view, but then it slowly drifts out. It's not satisfying because we're not locked on We're not centered on our North Star. We're not grounded in something. And so things are not that satisfying. You know, it's, if I locked on Saturn but I had not aligned with the North Star, I would know that Saturn in my life, you know, it's going to be there probably about 20, 30, 40 seconds, something like that, not that long. So I will have achieved it, but it won't be lasting. But if I'm locked in first to the North Star and I find Saturn, I can go in the house, I can do something, I can come back out, still there. I have it. I've acquired it. So the analogy to me is, I was just thinking about this last night. It's a good analogy. It's like we are not locked on our North Star so often. We're feeling life is lacking something. It just, I can't hang on to anything that is permanently satisfying, because I have not first locked onto my North Star. I have not first locked onto that inner presence. And that's important to do, because it's the one thing, just like the North Star, that does not move. It's like the axle in the wheel. Just imagine a spinning wheel, and you've got some object pasted on this wheel, and you're trying to follow that object. You're looking at it through a small aperture, and sometimes it's in your view and sometimes not. It's turning. But if you move your vision to the axle, it never changes. It's always there, even though it doesn't matter how fast the wheel spins. But we think if I can just lock on that star, lock on that object, lock on that resolution to that problem, or whatever, put it behind me, I'll be happy. And, you know, we want to do that, of course. But we lock on it, and then it goes out of our view because we're not locked in here. We're not locked, we're not centered in ourselves. And we are, when you're not centered in yourself, you think that a resolution to something will satisfy you. And it doesn't. It does for a time. I've had so many issues in my life that I just couldn't wait for them to get resolved so I could get on with life, and we want that. But you see, the universe doesn't really care. If you look at Saturn, if you look at the Orion Nebula, if you look at Andromeda, if you look at anything, it's there no matter what. But do you want to have that experience? That's really all that's being asked. And it's not the universe asking it, it's you. It's the universe is saying, I'm spread out here. Everything you can imagine is here. Do you want it? And I say, yes, I do want this. Okay. If you want satisfaction in this life, you've got to lock on to your North Star. You've got to align yourself with what you are at the deepest level. You've got to touch that ground of being, as Paul Tillich called it, where you know that's what you're looking for in life. And everything else, you know, all the looking at the planets and all this other stuff is, do it. There's nothing wrong with it. Pursue it. But if you pursue it in a wrong way, it won't be satisfying. You'll be constantly adjusting, constantly trying to. I think what most of us do, we don't lock onto the North Star. We put our telescope on a planet and we pray that the universe stops. God, please, give me this answer. Stop the Earth from turning, because I want to look at this thing. But do you think the universe cares that we're having a problem with that? It's not a matter of caring, it's a matter of aligning ourselves with the way it works. And that's really what life is about. It's what we're seeking to discover in this whole spiritual journey. It's not that we're making these affirmations to try to make something true. We want to align ourselves with what is true. That's what this is all about. That's what the spiritual education is all about. You know, what the traditional Christian has done is created a story, and that we are trying to fit into that story. We're trying to make sense of that story. It's a popular story. People have bought into it, and primarily because we were born into it, and that's our authority. And it's, if you get to the point where you don't accept that anymore, you may feel a little bit of guilt that you're letting go of this, or maybe a little fear. Maybe they're right, kind of thing. But then you get past that, and you say that's a perspective. That is a template somebody laid over reality. And do I have to accept that as being true? Is that true? Is that really true? And because it makes somebody happy, it doesn't mean it's true. Just like the gentleman this morning that I was talking to, he'll find a place that makes him happy. Would it make me happy? No, I'm sure it wouldn't. It's true as far as he's concerned, but I would just say he's not done with the spiritual journey. I'm not saying we're the end of the line either. But I have been on that road, and I know what it feels like. I know what it is like. And when you start having more questions than answers, it's time to move on. And that's what we've probably all done here. But we're not trying to change the universe. We're not trying to change God. We're not trying to get God to behave differently. I shouldn't say we're not trying to do that. Many of us are trying to do that. What is an affirmation? You're looking at Mars. You're not locked into the North Star. Mars is moving. You're saying, Mars is standing still. I envision Mars standing still. How ridiculous would that be? Totally. So here's the thing. You forget Mars and you go back to the North Star. You go back and lock into the North Star first and then visit Mars. Do you think you're being punished by the universe when Mars is floating across your lens? No. You are engaging in principle, but you're not cooperating with it. So it's not working according to what you are expecting or wanting, but it is working. Prayer is to make an adjustment. So in my scenario here, what would that be? It'd be get your telescope back on the North Star and lock it in. And then go to Mars, because nobody's going to say, you're not supposed to be looking at Mars. You're not good enough. You haven't read enough astronomy books. You don't deserve to look at Mars. We hear all of these things in traditional religion. But it's because we're not cooperating with principle. And principle is, it's you first, your connection with God first. It's your awakening, your centeredness in God, and then everything else comes into focus. Everything else is okay. There are no rules that say, because you haven't earned it or deserved it, or you haven't read all the astronomy books, you can't look at Mars. You can't have an experience like you want. What is for sure is you can't have an experience like you want if you don't follow the rules, if you don't follow the principles. If you don't lock on the North Star first, you can look at Mars for a while, and then you can struggle to stay up with it. I've tried to do that before, too. You just keep adjusting, it keeps going away. And you want to throw a rope around it and say, hang on. So you can do it that way, and that's how a lot of us live our lives. We're going through life always trying to correct, always trying to fix, always trying to bring back into view something that wants to seem to run away from us. But that's not the problem. So what is guidance? Is guidance looking wrongly or looking through your telescope not utilizing the principles of it, and praying or affirming that it does work somehow. Somehow we can make this work. Or is guidance the simple matter of slewing back to the North Star? Starting there, getting yourself locked in, taking time to be still. You're involved in this pursuit in life, and something is bothering you. And so you're out there trying to focus on it, trying to keep it from moving out of your view, trying to resolve it. What you will find is that as you let it go, you stop trying to do that. Just forget Mars, forget that thing, whatever it is. Come back into yourself, go alone. Open yourself to the presence of God. You say, how do I do that? Find out how to do it. How do you lock on to the North Star? You've got to find it. You have to find it. I went online to do some research on how to use this little scope finder that I have. I still had to go outside, get on my knees, and I wasn't praying, and look through this thing and find the North Star. I had to do that because all of the YouTube videos in the world, they can show me what needs to be done, but I have to do it. Otherwise, my scope will not be in alignment. And that is such an appropriate analogy for how we approach this whole spiritual thing. We read about how someone else did it. We read about the benefits of it. It's inspiring. But are we actually kneeling in front of our telescope, looking through a little tube and focusing on our North Star, having the experience of getting tuned in? Because if you do not set your telescope, it will not work properly. It works properly. It just doesn't give you the results you want. See, that's the thing. This universe is always working properly. God is always working properly. If we're not getting the results we want, we're not adjusting or locking our telescope in. And that is, so what's guidance? Guidance is about that. It's not about how do I keep up with a fast-moving Mars. And that's how we normally think about it. Even if we happen to bring our object into the eyepiece, in a matter of seconds it drifts out of view. So that's the pursuit. And, I look at, there's on my Facebook page, there's all kinds of people that are involved in New Thought things. And I'm amazed at how many seem to be talking about how to stay locked on Mars without going to the North Star. The assumption is, well, you're a child of God. You shouldn't really need to do that. You deserve a beautiful view of Mars. Yeah, okay. You do. You deserve it. Not that you deserve it, but you can have it. No cost. The only cost is understanding the principle. And that's why I focus so much on individuality. It's the first expression of God that you are. It's your life. That's your North Star, your Polaris. And if we get back into this place, you're going through this thing and your mind's all over the place, let it go. Stop trying to focus on Mars. Stop trying to resolve that problem that you're having, and go first, seek first the kingdom of God, and all else will be added. That makes perfect sense. Seek first the North Star, and everything else will fall in place. That makes perfect sense to me. And what's that mean? It means I'm trying to resolve things in my life so I'll feel better. Well, why not go to that center and feel better, and then go out in your world and deal with the situations? That's the point. Seek first the kingdom, and everything else falls in place. because you will resolve this thing or that thing, and another thing will come up. You know, you can say, okay, I saw Mars for a little while, and I was able to follow it because I made these fast adjustments, and it's a lot of work, but I was able to do that. So I think I'll look at Venus. And so we go to Venus, and we search around until we finally find Venus. And then we do the same thing. You know, we have to keep adjusting the knobs to keep Venus in focus. And by the end of the night, we're just worn out. We're doing the work the telescope is supposed to be doing. See, we call it divine order, but it's almost like math. That's why I think Ernest Holmes referred to it as religious science, and Mary Baker Eddy called it Christian science. There's a science involved in this universe. We work a certain way, and most of us don't know what that is. We're trying to fulfill ourselves from the outside. Our North Star is here. It's inside of us. It's our very soul. It's our heart. And we don't experience that. We feel this restlessness that we've got to have something more added to our life to be whole. But the whole thing is guidance takes us to our North Star. It takes us to that place where we are fulfilled to begin with. Fulfillment is not a place you end up. It's where you begin. And we don't get that because we're trained to think, I don't have enough, I need more of something. And so we're on this quest for, and we go out and we find stuff and we work real hard to stay focused on it. It just keeps drifting out like it's not supposed to be. So there's people that say that, you know, Venus drifts out of sight, so we say, well, it must not be meant to be. God must not want me to see Venus. God could care less. If you're looking at a fly, a dandelion, or Venus, has no impact whatsoever on God. The only impact it has is on you. What would you rather look at, a fly or Venus? How about a Venus flytrap? Okay. So what is guidance? Is guidance a better finder scope? You know, and you need a finder scope. It's a little scope that sits on top of your telescope. And I say little because if you're a professional, at a professional level, it's quite large. But a finder scope has a wide field of view, so you can see a real big area. And you see the star, you see the planet, whatever, and then you move your telescope to that. You know, the computer's running the whole thing, but you fine-tune it. And it's a very helpful device. So, okay, I need a wider field of view. I need a better finder scope. But that's not it. That's not the answer. If I could just find a better way to spot these objects, I'd be more successful. It's true that you will, but you'll still have the same problem. You'll bring that thing into view, you'll bring a resolution to your problem, but it'll still move. It's still moving all the time. So that's not what guidance is. It's not a better finder scope. It's not a better set of affirmations and denials. It's not a better understanding of anything other than you need to lock on your North Star. Stop the search and bring the telescope into proper polar alignment, center on the North Star. If you're involved in something now, this is perfectly in alignment with your life. You're doing something, you're trying to resolve a problem, lay it down. Stop doing that. Stop trying to figure it out. Go apart, be still, start letting go. Let go of the energy, let go of the thoughts, let go of that, I've got to get this done, I've got to lock on that thing, I've got to follow it, I've got whatever. Just let it go. Let that whole thing go because it's not going to work until you get back to your center. And as you get back to your center, you begin to feel the power that you have never lost. You've always had this. You stop your search. That's the first step. Stop trying to resolve the problem. Return to your spiritual center guidance, all guidance takes you back to your spiritual center. It takes you back to your North Star. That's what guidance is all about. It's not about, should I do this, should I do that? It's find your strength and you'll know what to do. Your telescope is programmed to do the right things. It's almost mathematics. And maybe it is mathematics. Maybe it's more than mathematics. Do a spiritual alignment. Again, that's all just letting go. Then return to your regular life. When you touch your center of power, you will then go out and know what to do. It's like your telescope knows where to go once it's centered. You know where to go. You know what to do once you're centered. And just to end this, I want to show you one of the pictures I did get earlier last week. So it's there, and when the telescope is set right, it's pretty incredible that we can do this. I've never taken a picture of the moon like this before. I've seen it like that, but it's a lot of fun to do. But the thing is, it's, even if you're an amateur like I am, it's fun. But there's nothing out there saying you can't do this. It's just spread out, waiting for us to take a look at. All right? So everybody run out and buy a telescope, and then we'll... Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bator. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.